Everybody, and welcome to our workshop this morning. This is one of the National Network of Libraries of Medicine Rural Health Grant projects, and we're very happy to have Darren Larson with us this morning, guest presenting about mindfulness and sneaking mindfulness into real life. And Darren has a background in social work and librarianship, so has a lot of things that are very relevant to our population. And I have a short bio of him here. Darren Larson uses what people know about physical fitness to help them navigate the challenges of mindfulness practice. He has been practicing daily mindfulness for almost 18 years, attends silent meditation retreats annually, and has contributed brain scans to research studies at Harvard and the University of Vermont. In addition to coaching individuals, he gives talks, leads workshops, and teaches classes for companies, hospitals, and continuing education programs. Even in his previous roles as a parent, social worker, and information resources librarian, Darren has always been energized by identifying relevant resources to help people navigate their challenges and interests more effectively. So Darren, thank you again for being here, and take it away.
All right, thanks so much, Joy. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity, and I'm excited to share my take on mindfulness with you guys. I hope you find it interesting, and I want to appreciate everybody who responded to my prep questions ahead of time, because it was really useful to me, and I hope that some of the things I can share from what you shared with me are actually really relevant to what I hope to, some ideas I want to kind of trigger and plant with you today. I want to start. My approach to mindfulness is going to be kind of different than maybe what you've encountered in the past. I'm really interested in making this practical, doable, challenging, but doable, right? Here's an example. I'm going to set a timer on my Fitbit for 20 minutes. And if you would like to take advantage of this opportunity, see what shifts can you make right now to see if you can give the bulk of your attention to what I'm sharing for at least these first 20 minutes. And I'll let you know when that 20 minutes passes, and you can decide at that point. And some things that people have done in the past are maximizing this window. So this is all you see on your computer screen. Maybe putting your phone on Do Not Disturb, or maybe deciding not to check email or text just for these first 20 minutes. And this is something that I hope to plant an idea of something you could sneak into your daily work routine, of deciding for 20 minutes you're really going to focus on one thing. To me, this is applied mindfulness, or doing something that can become a habit that strengthens your attentional skills. So here we go. The 20-minute counter is starting. I want to launch into the kind of classic definition from Jon Kabat-Zinn. Jon Kabat-Zinn is really responsible for all the conversation that have exploded in the world since the late 70s. He's the first one to say, you know what, if this is ever going to be taken seriously, this idea of mindfulness, we need to get some quantifiable data. We need to observe. We need to take a scientific approach. Pretty sure he's out of MIT, but so he started there. He's a doctor, or at least maybe a biologist, but he had found mindfulness to be beneficial and was trying to get some validity. His definition, and it's kind of stuck. He's famous for developing the mindfulness-based stress reduction program you might have heard of, but his definition is mindfulness is about paying attention in a particular way. And that particular way is paying attention on purpose, in the present moment, non-judgmentally, which is accurate. And I don't always know how useful that is. It's a start that sometimes ends up being an ending. I'd like to challenge some of these assumptions and make some of this clearer. And I have some ways of taking this sort of broad general definition, which, the problem is, everyone thinks they're paying attention on purpose in the present. Maybe non-judgmentally, but we already think we're doing it. So when we hear about mindfulness, we think, well, yeah, I'm already doing that. And actually, it's a subtle but significant difference in being able to cultivate this quality of attention. And I have some ideas that I think will make that a little more accessible. And what I want to do is get beyond this idea of these kind of stereotypical cliche images of what mindfulness is. I have a deep appreciation for how difficult it is to illustrate mindfulness. But this is what it ends up looking like everywhere. It's hard to illustrate what's it like to pay attention on purpose in certain ways. So what we get are these skinny, flexible, maybe rich ladies on expensive cushions, probably sitting near an ocean. I say that usually there's maybe a cat or some yogurt or some incense. And these are trying to convey sort of this leftover hippie image, I think. There's these stock images of serenity. But I don't think that they're super useful. At least what I'm trying to do is not take a break from life, not escape my life, but prepare myself to engage in it more fully. So I want to expand away. I want to maybe even explode this idea that, yeah, mindfulness can look like sitting on a cushion or a chair or closing your eyes, but it doesn't have to. In the same way that if we want to get physically fit, it's not just we get massages and that we take naps and that we get enough sleep. Those are important things that we could do if that's how you want to go about part of your self-care. But if you want to be physically fit, you're going to have to challenge your body. It's just inevitable. There is no gaining heart health, muscular strength, flexibility without exercising. So in my approach to mindfulness, I want to go beyond just this idea of I can get better at relaxing and include getting better at exercising my attention. What happens when we try to do that, though? Anyone who tries to exercise their attention with mindfulness runs into this initial hurdle. It's kind of like an initiation. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't get past this initiation point because they misinterpret what happens. What happens is you hear about these outcomes. Mindfulness is going to help me sleep better, lower my blood pressure. Maybe it's going to help me have less stress. And then you try a mindfulness exercise. It's really easy to expect the exercise to feel like the outcomes you're hoping for. So you try to notice some sensation, and when your attention wanders, you bring it back to that sensation. What you discover, and we'll do this here in a minute, is how quickly and persistently your attention wanders. And it can feel like, well, wait a second, I thought I was going to have some relaxation, and instead I have nothing but constantly needing to redirect my attention. This is why mindfulness teachers will say over and over again, don't try to stop thinking, just gently return your attention, just gently steer back to the thing you've decided to notice, because it's inevitable that your attention's going to wander. So when we exercise our attention, it's very similar. If we exercise our bodies, we know if let's say I have an opportunity to take the elevator or the stairs. Nothing wrong with taking the elevator, at least pre-COVID, right? I take the elevator frequently. I'm not against elevators. But if I never take the stairs, I miss an opportunity to exercise my heart, my lungs, my legs, get my blood flowing. But if I decide to take the stairs, I'm inviting a short-term discomfort that's building a capacity. We know this. If you try to be physically fit without being uncomfortable, you're in trouble. But if you decide, oh, I'm going to start get physically fit, more physically fit, I'm going to have to choose exercises, ways of moving my body that I will do. Maybe that's swimming or riding my bike or taking my dog on longer walks. But I'm going to have to move outside my comfort zone to be able to be more comfortable in my body and my health. It's the very same principle with attentional fitness. I call mindfulness attentional fitness because it's exercising our attention to develop skills. Those skills require that we move outside our comfort zone. And the irony is, if we want to get better at relaxing, we have to get better at not being relaxed. A lot of little things along the way that we discover. And part of why I think this is important, why this is worth doing, it's something similar to why physical fitness took root in the 70s and 80s, especially with things like jogging. Before that time, jogging was not a popular thing. People did not join gyms and go running around their neighborhoods. And I think part of what drove the movement towards physical activity and exercise was that our culture had changed. Enough people had become find themselves making a living in ways that did not require physical exertion. So a lot of desk jobs, a lot of information related work, a lot of sitting around. And that initially it feels like a big victory. Like our grandparents would be so glad, or our great grandparents would be so glad to hear we're not damaging our bodies in the way we make a living. But what happens is when we become sedentary, as we all discover, if I don't move my body habitually, it starts to show up in my cholesterol, my weight, how if I'm gaining weight, I'm becoming less flexible. So in the 70s and 80s, 25 million people started jogging, including celebrities, and even President Carter was jogging. And initially, it's kind of like the weird people or the celebrities or the people, and it has to look a certain way. And maybe you have a terry cloth headband, and you have to have the right jogging clothes. Eventually, that initial early adopter phase recedes, and it starts to be that people realize I just gonna have to find a way to go jogging around my neighborhood if I want to join in on this. It becomes less of a craze and more of a thing we just all take for granted as something that can benefit us. And I think what's happening right now is just in the way that we became more sedentary at that time, and still kind of are, right? We can be easily. What's happening in our culture that's different than it was a decade or two ago is this unbelievable demand on our attention. So there are so many, like if you think about the big companies, the biggest companies, the most profitable companies right now, are all competing for your attention. And to this point, up to this point, we have not yet figured out that if we don't exercise our attention, we're at the mercy of who demands it. So mindfulness, I think, is becoming so popular because it's pointing to the fact that maybe I don't have to let this be a passive thing that I just yield to. You can have my attention if you just push my buttons. And instead, what if I decide what to notice sometimes? If I decide more often than never where to put my attention instead of leaving that to my default settings. When we start to exercise our attention, we know what happens in the body, whether we exercise or not. We know it's well established. I can increase my muscular strength. I can increase my flexibility, my heart health, the general chemistry of my body. Let's say if I have an issue like diabetes, I can improve things by exercising. But what improves when we develop our attentional skills? When we realize that our ability to pay attention is trainable, that we can notice what's happening moment by moment. When we do this, we can develop the ability to savor pleasant moments more. We actually are not as good at savoring pleasant moments as we like to think we are. We long for pleasant moments, but then when we experience them, we sort of, it's really easy to miss out on those quiet moments. We also can practice fighting with unpleasant moments less. We can kind of erode this internal friction that is habitual, that is so persistent we don't even realize is there until it starts to thin out a little bit. And when these things happen, we start to feel more at home in the messiness of life, the uncertainty, the constant change. And I think right now there's like a huge opportunity to realize this with all the variety of uncertainty, the intensity of uncertainty going on. Another benefit of attentional skills is when we try to exercise our attention. It's not that it's complicated. It's actually really simple to redirect your attention, but it's not easy to practice consistently. Just like one push-up is, I guess, sometimes relatively simple. I can just push my body away from the floor one time. But if I want to actually increase the muscular strength of my chest, I'm going to have to do enough repetition that it becomes difficult. When we realize how difficult it is to concentrate, to regulate our emotions, to be better at being uncomfortable, it sort of plants a seed of empathy and compassion. We realize that we share this challenge with everybody that we meet, people we like and people who push our buttons. We all share this same challenge. So it can be a really powerful impact to cultivate attentional skills. At this time in particular, we find ourselves kind of, I go on retreats every year, which is sort of opting into being uncomfortable. It's not a spa vacation. It's actually practicing paying attention closely for several days. This feels more like a marathon than a massage, with lots of good catharsis and lots of good payoff, but that payoff is all earned through hard work. But I opt in. I choose to do this. And what I keep thinking about when it comes to the coronavirus is that the world seems to be forced into a retreat, whether you want one or not. The unfortunate part of that is that we don't, on a retreat, you get instruction. How do you navigate these challenges? What we're finding ourselves in the uncertainty of the pandemic and economic uncertainty, political polarization, we've got this opportunity to decide how to relate to these challenges without a lot of instruction and support and how to do that. But I think that the good news is this time is going to pass anyway. We don't know if it's 6 months, a year and a half before we go to a different kind of degree of less vigilance. We don't know. But we do know that at some point, at least I think there's evidence to say that this will have an endpoint. So we've got this challenge of this time between now and then. And the danger is that we tend to do this all the time. My real life will start back up on the other end of this crisis. And I'd like to suggest that we can use this crisis to develop skills that we can then bring with us to our post-coronavirus world. And at the same time, it's not just that life after coronavirus is my real life, but this messy season of challenge, this messy indefinite period of time, this is your life too. And it is hard, but there's also a lot of good things hiding in plain sight, and we can practice leveraging some of that as well. But I think that mindfulness can be a big part of helping in this, because it can help sort of develop a kind of immunity against, we have this resistance to discomfort. When there's lots of discomfort around, we can choose to sometimes work with it. We can develop an immunity to it, so that I don't need to be comfortable all the time if I work on this as a project. It strengthens our ability to focus under pressure. Anytime we try to practice mindfulness, we're practicing in deciding what to notice and working against the challenge of that endeavor. It helps us to build our persistence. And again, like I said, it helps us to recognize the humanity we share with other people, which I think is really needed right now. It's really easy when we're uncomfortable to look for people to blame. It's complicated, but we oversimplify that. So what I'd like to do with the time here is take this definition of mindfulness that I shared at the beginning and break that down and make it more usable, more doable, challenging but doable. And how I like to do that is to approach mindfulness as a capacity, but also mindfulness as an exercise, and have those be distinct as a way in to attentional fitness. And then to give some ways of how to explicitly exercise your attention in ways that can really be customized to fit you. Let's start with mindfulness as a capacity. And I'm checking my watch to see. We're still good on that 20 minutes. You still have about 4 or 5 minutes to go, so stay with me. I hope you're still with me. You think about a time when you felt really present. I asked people about this before the session, and I'm really pleased to see so many generous responses to this. And I want to share a couple of those right now. And I think it'll help you see where I'm going with this idea of you already are mindful. You already have a capacity for paying attention closely. It's just usually that the circumstances tend to dictate that. So some people replied to this question ahead of time and said when they felt really present, there was a sense of calm, no brain fog. They were listening without thinking about what they were going to say or thinking about something else. Someone said I felt really present going on a walk with my wife after dinner at a campground. I noticed the sound, the feel of the gravel under my feet, the feel of her hand in mine, the sound of her voice, the smell of the pine trees and the dust of the road and the changes in the air from warm to cool and back to warm again. I felt a piece of spiderweb on my left arm as I walked through it. And during the walk, all these things were present, but not one of them was louder than the others. It's really excellent and detailed. You can hear all those sensory details in that report. Someone said, spending time with my dog, stroking his fur, it feels like time slows down. Another person said, feeling in my body, deeply calm, not thinking about to-do lists. Someone went to a Qigong exercise class and said they were surprised how aware they were of their hands during the exercise and after. It's really interesting from a mindfulness perspective. It's not just when we're practicing, but that impact can stay with you as you go on into your routine. Someone says, I remember feeling my baby kicking during my third pregnancy. It was early on, around 15 weeks. I had to really focus on the sensation to be sure that that was what I was feeling. And I smelled, the house smelled like laundry detergent because I was folding my son's laundry at the time. And then one more I want to share, racing leaf boats at the waterfall with my kids, sitting on a cold stone, totally in the shade, watching the sunlight through the leaves. The boys and I are cheering their boats on. We're laughing so hard, my voice goes hoarse. And the moss is much softer on my fingers than I expected. So these are really good examples of this normal capacity we have. And I would even say you don't have to exercise your attention. You're already mindful. But we could exercise our attention and elevate that base capacity, that base level capacity you have. But let's start with this idea I just said that you're already mindful. And our 20-minute timer is going to end right in the middle of this exercise, but we'll see. And what I'd like you to do is just to check in with noticing if you can hear sounds around you right now. And certainly the sound of my voice as I'm talking, but what else is in your environment that you can hear? And how many different things are you able to hear? And are you aware of the temperature in the room? Is there a breeze? Are you hungry? Or are you full? Or somewhere in between? Are you feeling energetic, sluggish? Are you aware of any emotion impacting your current experience? And can you feel your legs? Can you feel your hands? Can you notice what it's like to breathe in, breathe out? Is there anything uncomfortable, any aches or pain or itches, too cold? What's it like to feel that sensation, to spot it and notice it closely? And is there any place in your body that feels settled or neutral or comfortable or even relaxed? So if you're able to do any of those things, and I'm assuming you're able to do all those things, that's evidence to me you're already mindful, because mindful just means paying attention on purpose. The tricky word in Jon Kabat-Zinn's description is that word non-judgmental, because what he's trying to say is what you notice doesn't have to be comfortable. You can notice an ache. You can be mindful of stress. You can be mindful of agitation. It doesn't have to be something relaxed and calm and peaceful. It doesn't have to be the breath that you're noticing. But that word non-judgmental gets in the way. It's actually, I think, a better way to think about this. And your 20 minutes is up, so you can decide if you want to keep going with that same quality, that intention to stay focused on the content here, which I think is a good one. But you can ease up on that if you like, because I told you you could. Anyway, so Thinking about mindfulness as a capacity is just the ability to be aware of the present, of your present experience with a degree of acceptance. So if we take away that word non-judgmentally and say that as you're noticing you're hungry or full, for those few seconds of noticing, you're able to just sort of not fight with it. The challenge is that I think what happens is, like, if without someone to direct you, to ask you, feel your hands, notice if you're hungry, notice if you're having an emotion, we tend to just default to kind of an autopilot mode. And what happens is we spend most of our day as we go through our routine with our attention anchored in our minds, in our imagination. We're thinking about the past and the future. We're problem solving. We're analyzing. We're evaluating. I think of all these things as we're making sense. We're making sense of the world. I love all of these things. These are not our opponents. They're actually not even our opponents of mindfulness. The problem, the opponent really, I guess, is autopilot. We don't know we're doing it. It just goes on autopilot. It just becomes a default setting. And the problem is that we so rarely disrupt autopilot mode. And mindfulness can be a powerful tool in leveraging your natural capacity for being able to pay attention on purpose. And how do we do that? We notice sensations closely. The reports I just read, I shared your responses. Could you hear all the sensory details? So we tend to all rely on the situations to be comfortable, for the sunset to be beautiful, for the breeze to be soothing, for the food to be delicious. Those things snap us out of autopilot mode. So as we have our attention anchored by default in our imagination, we're just swimming in sensation. But all those sensations tend to be hanging out in the background unnoticed, unless they're signaling some kind of problem or danger or threat, or maybe sometimes delight. It takes a lot to disrupt our autopilot mode. So you could think of mindfulness as not waiting for chance, not waiting for something random, but deciding to disrupt that autopilot on purpose more often than never, so that you could get better at deciding to disrupt it, to breaking your circumstance down and savoring the sensations that are available. When we're on autopilot mode, what happens is we develop a lot of habits for the kinds of stimulus that we like and don't like. Let's say, for example, maybe when you're young and you're having a first relationship, first love, and you get your heart broken, and you find that you're kind of moping around, and then you get a little Ben and Jerry's, and for that length of that pint, you feel a little less sad, a little less lonely. And if the next time you feel sad and lonely, you have another pint of ice cream, right? You see where I'm going? It starts to become that sadness leads me to the freezer or leads me to the kitchen to find something to numb that emotion I don't want to feel. And pretty soon that becomes a default, an autopilot mode. And this happens both with, it just happens. I would say we have an endless way of doing this. And it's very profitable, I think, to sell people things that numb their feelings, for example, that support going on autopilot mode. Think about all the things that cigarettes and alcohol and sometimes mind-numbing entertainment. There's a lot of money to be made in keeping us kind of stuck in these loops of reactivity. So mindfulness is a way to mine that little space between a stimulus and our automatic reaction to it, so that we can choose our response. And I want to be clear. This is not something I've mastered. This is something I've been working at for a couple decades, and is an ongoing project. But you know what? I'm not done working out physically either. I've been exercising for years and years, and it doesn't necessarily get easier. I still have to outsmart myself and trick myself into doing it. And there's always something to work on, flexibility or strength or consistency. But the real power of mindfulness is discovering that we have an ability to choose our response to what's happening instead of being at the mercy of it. This also comes into play. I want to make a library connection here. I feel like this is super relevant when you think of our current challenge of the disinformation going on in the world, this misinformation about the coronavirus or about a lot of political matters. Mike Caulfield, where is he? University of Washington, I believe, has developed this, what he calls the SIFT strategy for not spreading misinformation. And the first one is to stop and notice what kind of emotional reaction you're having. So you happen upon some information and you really want to spread it. You really want to post it on Facebook or Twitter or call someone and tell someone, did you know this is happening? But his idea is to practice recognizing that impulse to share something maybe scandalous, and investigate it before you share it. What if you investigated the source and find some more credible sources to verify, trace it back to its original, and to see if there's something questionable about the original source. So the most mindfulness aspect of this for me is the reminder to stop. And what if we did this more, not just with news, but in general, information we get about at the workplace? Did you hear this? Did you hear this? I think that we don't stop enough and notice, when I get this information, how does it make me feel? Where am I feeling it? What am I feeling? Can I get more intimately familiar with my emotional reactions to things? Not just upsetting things, but also pleasant things. When I hear a song I like, when I'm spending time with someone I care about. But certainly to get better at not spreading things just because they freak us out, just because we fear them. And deciding consciously how to respond to those reactions. We have to bring our emotional responses into our conscious awareness instead of leaving it at autopilot, so that we have fewer, I think, regrets of how we behave, how we act based on it. You know, the thing we often talk about with mindfulness is that it's about being more present, being in the present moment. But what we don't say often enough is how the present moment really varies. Some moments are really conducive to being present, like you're walking on the beach on a vacation and the weather is ideal. And then we've got, on the opposite end, we've got this extreme of being stuck in traffic and you have a meeting you're trying to get to, or you have something important you're trying to do. We can be mindful in either of these situations, but that mindfulness is going to look and sound and feel very different depending on the circumstance. And there's a lot of variation between walking on a beach and being stuck in traffic. And anywhere along that point of how challenging the moment is, we can get better at checking in with the sensory details. What's actually happening right now? So what I'm trying to stress here is we don't have to wait for the beach to practice mindfulness. You don't have to go to the beach to be mindful. You don't have to have a perfect circumstance or a completely quiet room. I'm not practicing mindfulness to get good at sitting in a quiet room. I'm practicing to engage more consciously, inhabit my life more fully. And when we notice sensations habitually on purpose, we try to do this, it prepares us to respond to life's challenges more effectively. So the more I practice, the better equipped I am for those moments that are harder, like lots of uncertainty or being unable to get the traffic to move. Which leads us into thinking about mindfulness as an exercise. How do we elevate this base level capacity of being able to notice what's happening with some degree of acceptance? The mindfulness answer, if we want to look at this as an attentional skill, is if we want to exercise our attention, we notice sensations with openness. And that means, that openness means for a few seconds, being clear about what it is I'm noticing and trying to stay with it without trying to change it. Whether that's an exhale or hunger or sadness or fear or confusion, noticing the sensations that are present without trying to change them for a handful of seconds. It's like one push-up. And like one push-up's not going to get us very far. But if we start doing 10 push-ups 3 times every other day, then the structure of our body literally changes. If we start hearing sounds noticing emotional responses, noticing that our buttons have been pushed before we send that email, for example, it starts to become really real, that we can pause, notice the sensation, disrupt that autopilot reaction, and start to feel like we're having more ability to decide our response. So the more we exercise, this is my way of breaking down Jon Kabat-Zinn's definition into an exercise and a capacity. He said, pay attention in the present on purpose, non-judgmentally. I say, when you habitually notice sensations with this kind of openness I'm describing, your capacity for being aware of the present with a kind of acceptance just grows. It just grows. It's not that you're a better person. It's just that your physiology, your nervous system knows how to do what I'm talking about. You're equipped to get better at being comfortable with being uncomfortable, to navigate uncertainty better. We're equipped with it. We just have to practice. We just have to exercise. There's a study done at Carnegie Mellon a couple years ago. Took 150 stressed out people, which I like to refer to as people, divided them randomly into 3 groups, and they gave some instruction over phone apps, 20 minutes a day for 2 weeks. First group was assigned education in coping skills. So these are the things we're inundated with, tips for better eating, tips for exercise, tips for responding emotionally to things. Like Oprah, it'd be like Oprah would recommend coping skills. I should say that all 3 of these groups, they collected lots of data, lots of surveys, subjective stress evaluations. Everyone says they're stressed. They also collected blood pressure and cortisol levels. Second group, they taught them through this phone app, 20 minutes a day, 2 weeks, how to notice sensations. What's it like to hear? What's it like to see? What's it like to feel something in your body, something physical, something emotional? Third group, same thing as the second group, but they added this quality of openness. While you're noticing a sound, don't try to change it. While you're feeling sad, just feel it without trying to fix it. At the end of these 2 weeks, they collected more data. They asked everybody how they're feeling. Everyone in general said they felt less stressed. But the only group with any kind of a noticeable biometric change was this third group that habitually, not a lot of time, 2 weeks, 20 minutes a day, noticing sensations with openness without trying to change them, had a 20% drop in their blood pressure and a 50% drop in their cortisol, and that's that stress measure. So it's not nothing to notice a sensation without trying to change it, especially when that becomes habitual. And if you think about a way to clarify the technique, I love the work being done by Judd Brewer. This is back when he was at Yale. He's now in charge of mindfulness research at Brown School of Public Health. But he was using real-time fMRI technology to help people get more immediate indication of when they're trying a mindfulness exercise. I don't know, you might have seen Anderson Cooper do this on 60 Minutes when they had, Anderson Cooper was doing a thing on mindfulness and he had Dr. Brewer, Judd Brewer on, and they hooked him up so he could do this. But I love this example. Here's an example. I'm not showing the first 2 runs of the experiment, just the third and fourth, because the first 2 look a lot like the number 3. What this indicates, there's a white line, a horizontal line, and the red lines above indicate that the person is making sense. Like I was saying earlier, they're thinking, analyzing, problem solving, remembering, fantasizing. It's engaging the part of the brain that is making sense of the world. And the blue lines below indicate that the person is noticing a sensation closely. There's what's called the default mode network is active in the red. And when we pay attention to a sensation closely for a few seconds, that default mode network is dampened. They call it being dampened. It's less active. So what happened in this person, they were telling the person to notice that you're breathing, notice your breath. And when he gets this immediate feedback the third time, that when he was noticing his breath, he was still doing a lot of thinking. He said, well, I thought you asked me to think about my breath. And then it occurred to him, oh, you don't want me to think about breathing or try to control it or analyze it. You're asking me to literally feel the sensations of breathing. So when he went back into the fMRI machine round 4, this was the result, that the default mode network was quiet and the brain, his attentional resources were allocated to literally feeling the sensations of breathing. So it's a really expensive way to try to teach someone how to refine their mindfulness exercise. But it's cost prohibitive. We can't all have this, but we can learn the lesson that he learned by realizing what we're being asked to do here is not think about sensations, but actually literally to notice them closely. So let's try this for 1 minute. Let me readjust my timer here for 1 minute. And we're going to try a little exercise. So it'd be like, that horrible exercise where you try to hold a plank posture for 1 minute and you start to notice how, oh my gosh, how long does a minute last? Let's try this with going back to hearing sounds in your environment. So find a sound in the environment where you are. You can like it or not like it, doesn't matter. And listen to it closely for a few seconds. And then at the end of that repetition of noticing, either repeat that same sound or find a different sound. I'm going to start the 1 minute timer. You can zoom into one sound at a time, listen in one direction, to the left or to the right, or you can take in the sounds all around you at once. But see if you can get a rhythm going of deciding what to listen to, listening to it closely without trying to change it, and repeat. And if there's no sound, what's it like to hear the silence that's there? Okay, excellent. That's 1 minute of mindfulness exercise by tuning into external sounds. And I'm assuming that your attention was not like laser focused, but if you did your best effort at trying to get a rhythm going of hearing sounds one after another and coming back to that idea, that activity, whenever you realized you'd wander away, you did that perfectly. I'm not sure if I said this up front, but one of the things that motivates me to kind of advocate attentional fitness is that I'm convinced people who try mindfulness they're doing it right. It's not what they expected, and they're convinced they're doing it wrong. So if I can help people realize that how to better interpret their experience, then it sets them up to have the possibility of actually practicing long enough to experience those benefits they're hoping for. I do want to say real quickly, this image I've got of this college kid standing in line here or waiting for something at the deli. To me, how do I know this person's not being mindful? I'm assuming he's pausing to either notice a sensation in his body. Is he hungry? Is he stressed? Is he seeing what options he has for what to eat? Mindfulness does not have to be sitting on an expensive pillow with your eyes closed in a quiet room. I encourage sneaking it into the midst of your ordinary life, even though no one around you notices you're doing it. I think that's the really consistent practice without drawing attention to yourself is a really solid way to explore this and making it fit your life. So speaking of that, how do we do this? How do we exercise your attention? It's very much like physical exercise. We tend to just have all or nothing approaches to everything. So, right, well, I can't be an Olympic athlete, so why should I go to the gym? Why should I lift weights? But I think we all sort of know when it comes to physical exercise, doing anything is what matters. And if we're doing nothing, it's hard to build on that. If we're doing anything, we can decide if we want to nudge ourselves up a little bit. So when it comes to physical exercise, if you start walking a little more, you're in the fitness club, physical fitness club. If you want to up your game, walk farther, or start training for like a 5K, then that's up to you. But there's this whole continuum of just getting a little more steps, walking more, maybe even running or training for an event. When it comes to attentional exercise, mindful pauses scattered throughout the day, you're in the club. You don't have to be practicing formal meditation to be in what I consider the club, the tribe of attentional fitness. If you pause more than never to notice the sensation, welcome to the club. You're in the club. Now, the tricky part is to remember to do that. We'll talk about that in a second. But if you start to decide that maybe those pauses would be bolstered by a little bit of timed practice, like what we did, 1 minute of hearing sounds is going to increase the likelihood that I'll hear a sound some other point in the future, in the near future during my day. So if I combine time practice with those mindfulness pauses, then that's a way to go about it. In fact, I think it's really the intention. It's not to get good. I don't run on the treadmill to get good at running on the treadmill. I run on the treadmill so that I have a little more energy in my day, in my life. You know, the extreme example or the more intense example would be if we think of like training for a half marathon, in the mindfulness world, the equivalent would be going on to some kind of intensive practice, whether you practice all day or maybe go on a retreat. But all these are options. There's no right one way to do this. So the mindfulness breaks, there's a researcher, Ellen Langer. She's at an Ivy League school. I meant to look that up. I love Ellen Langer. She's kind of caustic and has some biting remarks, which I love in a mindfulness person. She's been studying mindfulness for decades, but she doesn't even study formal timed practice or meditation at all. She just gets people to notice new things, habitually notice new things and notice how that impacts their experience. She's done some really interesting studies. I recommend looking her up. She's done something about people, having people in an environment where they're surrounded by stuff from the past, and they end up, their bodies just naturally start to show signs of being younger. Anyway, interesting stuff. I just like this idea of anytime you notice something, if you see something in front of your eyes, you hear a sound, you feel something in your body, noticing a sensation puts you in the present. You don't have to strain to be mindful. If you notice you're stressed, where do you feel that in your body? Is your jaw tight? What do you feel emotionally? It's not like I will be mindful when this stress passes. It's like, this is what it feels like to feel like I'm stretched past my capacity. Mindfulness feels like, at first, it feels like it's something I can't do right because I'm expecting it to feel relaxing. But to realize there's no way to do it wrong if I'm trying to disrupt autopilot, notice some sensation that's available. There's no way to do that wrong. So it goes from a no-win to a no-lose. And that's what I'm trying to steer people in that direction, to realizing that there's a no-lose here. So the one problem with relying on spontaneous awareness, just mindful pauses that you just don't plan, is that it's really easy to forget to do them because we stay on autopilot from the time we get up in the morning to the time we go to bed, and we're waiting for some trigger that doesn't necessarily come. So what you can do to kind of outsmart this is pick one task, something that you're going to do anyway that doesn't require a lot of thought. You can just do it on autopilot, and you know that, but you can decide to take it off autopilot. That could be brushing your teeth. 2-minute investment of what are the sensations involved in brushing my teeth, the taste of the toothpaste, the sounds of the brushing, the feel of the water, the toothpaste. That's a mindfulness exercise. You're investigating the sensations instead of what's the default. What are you usually doing when you brush your teeth? If you're like me, if I don't have a strategy that I'm employing, I'm rehearsing for something. I'm solving a problem. I'm planning my day. I'm structuring things. I'm arguing with politicians, and I'm just, the brushing my teeth is just happening. Same with the shower. You could notice, what's it feel like when the water hits my body in the shower? That's my mindfulness practice. Nobody knows I'm doing it. Or something like folding the laundry, unloading the dishes, doing chores around the house. I don't think that people struggle to be mindful because they can't find time to practice. My theory is we hate putting down that feeling of control, that entertainment of narrating, of thinking, of problem solving. We really don't like putting it down for even a few seconds. So if we're able to practice putting that making sense mode aside for the time it takes to unload the dishwasher, that alone could be a really interesting experiment. And I encourage you to find something that fits you, fits your life, that is intriguing to you. What happens? You don't have to tell anybody. What happens if I try this for a few days, a few weeks, a few months? See what happens. We have all these, what I would call these COVID triggers. So, you're going to have to maybe wash your hands more often. Why not use hand washing as your mindfulness practice? Or this idea of not touching your face. It's a really tricky one. I think a lot of us have just given up, but you could decide to notice. And this is a really interesting idea, is instead of trying to not touch your face, start with noticing that you are touching your face. And then sort of sneaking up on that and noticing the impulse to touch your face. And then notice what it feels like to not touch your face, even though you want to. The sensations of the face mask. I've got a doctor I started working with recently who's wearing a face mask all day. And she's starting to incorporate this. When my mask comes off at the end of the workday, she's savoring the pleasant sensation of all that being off of her face. What's something like that would work for you? And this is one of my most, I just think the world would be a different place if everyone practiced this a little bit, of noticing the emotional experience or reaction you're having as it's happening. So instead of waiting till the end of the day and telling someone, you'll never believe what my boss did, and we tell this story that justifies the emotion we felt earlier, even though we didn't really pay very close attention to it, we just knew we were frustrated. So we get together and we bond over these stories of, can you believe how hard my life is? But what if we practice noticing I'm reading an email and it feels pointed. It feels like it's pushing my buttons. What do I feel? What do I literally feel in my body? Where do I feel it? How intense is it? How strong? Is it moderate, intense? Is it mild? And does that feeling intensify? Does it change? Does the sensation change as I notice it? Or is it stable and unchanging? And when does it dissipate? This is a game changer exercise. Not for everybody. It's maybe not for now, but I can't imagine a more powerful exercise to recommend. You could think about when you read a headline, when you are talking to a family member, when you realize when someone else has a different interpretation, someone's not wearing their mask at the grocery store. Before you fix the world and fix the person, jump into things that we can't control. What do you feel? Where do you feel it? What happens when you habitually notice your emotional reaction over time? So we've got pausing to notice. We've got associating this kind of quality of attention with tasks that we're going to be doing anyway. We've got the possibility of, I didn't say explicitly, but if you do something that's pleasant, like taking a hot bath, you could savor the pleasant sensations of something you find soothing or relaxing, or you can notice the triggers that push your buttons emotionally. One last thing about that emotional, it doesn't have to be unpleasant emotion. It can be any emotion at all. So listening to music you like, what does it feel like? One of my favorite things to do is to sneak mindfulness into watching a movie. When I realize I'm having an emotional reaction, I can notice what I'm feeling. And part of what happens with this is you start to notice a difference between feeling an emotion that is earned in an artistic way, like a really skilled actor can generate complicated emotional reactions, and you can feel maybe even a little catharsis, versus feeling that your emotions are being manipulated. It's another really powerful aspect of this. So finally, getting to this idea of timed practice, which is the thing that most people think is the only thing that counts with mindfulness, but it's just an option. Timed practice just means you've decided what category of sensation you're going to notice and for how long. 1 minute of hearing sounds, 2 minutes of feeling relaxation in my body, 3 minutes of feeling whatever emotions I'm feeling at the end of the workday, for example. It all is arbitrary. There's no right duration, there's no right category of sensation. You could notice for 2 minutes what it's like to exhale, every day for 3 years, and you're great. It's fine. If you'll do that, then that's the right exercise for you. There's a ton of apps and tools to support this now. There's the ones I like to recommend first is called Insight Timer, and I have this on a handout that I'm going to make sure gets sent to you. It's also embedded in the notes of this slide. But Insight Timer I like to recommend it because it's free. It's got a huge library of guided exercise. The caveat is that library, what would I say? It's not necessarily an attentional fitness approach. There's a lot of stuff in there that doesn't resonate with me. So a lot of more the traditional, stereotypical, spiritual, I don't know, I call it woo-woo, a lot of woo-woo out there. But the tool is great if you use the library resources, filter, search, do a little research, find the ones that you like. But then there's lots of apps if you want to pay for them, and they all have like a free trial. The one I love right now is called Waking Up by Sam Harris. It's got a 50-day, 10 minutes a day, kind of a curriculum based. It's really well designed, really well done, really grounded in science. Highly recommend that one. There's one called Bright Mind that is multisensory, the way I practice and teach, seeing and hearing, feeling, not just breath awareness. Noticing thoughts, noticing emotions, it's all part of that. And it's a curriculum based as well. That's brightmind.com. Really popular ones are Headspace, been around the longest. Headspace been around the longest. People love Headspace. And it's always developing, very accessible. Calm has an emphasis on being calm. They've got some really clever things that they're building in, like celebrities like Matthew McConaughey, maybe reading a bedtime story, this kind of stuff. Some people love that as well. It's very personal. You have to decide what works for you. 10% Happier by Dan Harris is a good one too. So Sam Harris is the Waking Up app, and Dan Harris is the 10% Happier. He's also got a podcast and a book that I highly recommend, 10% Happier. If you look up 10%.com, spelling out the 10, TEN%, you'll find lots of stuff. I actually have a guest post in their newsletter, the 10% Happier newsletter from last year. And I also have content on the Bright Mind app and the Insight Timer app. So you can look for me on those. So just to kind of wrap things up, as far as my guidelines I like to recommend for people, if you're interested in this at all, my number one, well, it's really that consistency is more important than anything else. So consistent effort to just trying to pay attention to disrupt your autopilot. So if you notice a sensation on purpose more often than never, that is a great place to start. You'll hear a lot of advice you have to practice 20 minutes a day, which I think is crap because it's a setup for failure. The reason they say that is because the research studies usually do a 20-minute a day as a variable they can control. But it's not realistic for most people to just begin carving out 20 minutes a day to practice mindfulness. So if you notice a sensation on purpose more than never, then you're in the club already. You're already a member of the gym. And that could be simply tasting your coffee or noticing that you feel this pressure to get started at work and you're feeling rushed. This is what feeling rushed feels like. If one of the wisest things, the most useful thing anyone ever said to me at the very beginning when I started this back the fall of 2002, having a daily practice, is they said, make sure you prioritize practicing over reading or thinking about practicing. So if you have 10 minutes, use those 10 minutes to practice, or practice for 5 minutes and then read about it. It's really easy to think you can substitute the reading about it, especially when a topic like this. We try to make a concept out of mindfulness when it's really just a skill, a human skill that you have to cultivate. If you think about whether you decided you were going to read about how to play the piano versus taking piano lessons and practicing on a regular basis, which is going to lead to the result you want. It might take you a few years to play a song that you feel good about, and it might take a little while to get better at being uncomfortable, but we don't get there by reading about it. We get there by practicing. I recommend keeping it to yourself. It's too hard to explain to people, and actually people don't, for some reason, I think we bond over how our lives are hard. This is how we bond with each other. We say, oh, can you believe how slow the grocery store is? Can you believe nobody was wearing a mask or people weren't wearing their masks? This is how we bond. Mindfulness practice is a different mode. It's like you find yourself in line at the grocery store. It's not moving quickly. Someone's got their mask pulled down and their nose is sticking out. And you just decide to feel the frustration in your body, and also notice that your legs are really relaxed and you hear the sounds all around you of the grocery store sounds. And you decide for a few seconds you're going to forgo figuring it out, solving the world, policing everyone. If you do this, I guarantee you will be blown away how comfortable that feels to just inhabit the moment, even though it's challenging. And if you forgo the story of it. But if you tell people, I went to the store, the line was really moving slow, and I just really tuned into the sounds of the grocery store, and I could just savor the relaxation in my legs. People don't want to hear about it. You're not going to be supported and encouraged unless somebody already is also practicing. So you can but keep it to yourself. It's more fun that way. It gets you farther down the road. Related to that, once you start getting a taste of the benefit of mindfulness, you start realizing, or you start identifying all these other people who need mindfulness. It doesn't really work that way. It doesn't help to tell other people they need to be mindful, I've found. It's like telling someone in labor that she needs to relax. It's not going to go well, right? You work on your mindfulness. And if you wanted to give it to other people, I would say let your practice blossom and give that back indirectly to the other people who you think need it. It's a harder way to go. This idea of the 20 minutes a day, here's my take on this. Yeah, it's great if you can practice more, but why does it have to be now? Why not say, over the next few years, could I work towards from practicing more often than never and work in the direction, no matter how many years it takes me to get there, of being able to limit the time I spend worrying, distracting myself, numbing, going unconscious, going on autopilot. Can I, being asleep at night, right? Can I limit all of that to 23 hours and 45 minutes a day? Can I work up to that? Meaning starting with a few seconds here and there, building up gradually to an average of about 15 minutes a day of where I'm actually noticing what's happening while it's happening. Those 15 minutes don't have to be all at once either, but it's a nice goal to shoot for down the road in a long-term way. Noticing sensations, letting your imagination be in the background for a few seconds, working up to a few minutes a day. And this gets to my point that we don't save mindfulness for the most stressful times. It's a skill we cultivate. It's something we work on. There's a Greek philosopher and poet, Archilochus, who figured this out a very long time ago, as have a lot of wise people over the course of human history. A lot of wise people have figured out that we do not rise to the level of our expectations. You know, when the crap hits the fans, we fall to the level of our training. And so we can do our best right now, and we can create habits that will support leading to this ability to get better at savoring pleasant moments when they appear, when they happen, when we make them happen, when they happen spontaneously. We can get better at fighting with unpleasant moments less. It's an ongoing work. It takes a lot of practice, but you get a little taste of how the benefit of that, and you'll never go back to trying, to not trying to do that. And when we savor pleasant moments more and fight with ourselves less internally, less habitually on the inside, we discover that our sense of well-being and contentment becomes less and less dependent on the things that are outside our control. So we can inhabit our lives more fully, regardless of the circumstance we find ourselves in. It's a highly recommended. I dare you to try to find out for yourself if that ends up being true. And, you know, keep me posted. Let me know what you run into, both obstacles and when it goes well. So you can check out my website at homeinyourlife.com. I've got a podcasts on a local NPR station. I also put those podcast episodes on the Insight Timer. And I've been hosting, during the pandemic, I've been hosting practice sessions. If you go to my website at homeinyourlife.com, there's a practice session where you can get details about opportunities to practice no charge with me, either without guidance and often with guidance and discussion. So anyway, I hope you find this useful, and I again appreciate the time and attention to share my take on mindfulness with you.
Thank you very much, Darren. And to remind people, we have another session with him this Friday at 11 to 12, and then another one, I believe, August 20th. But all the information is on our website. And the idea is, of these is to help us learn for ourselves, but also hopefully to bring some of this information back to your libraries and share with your communities. So thank you again, Darren.
All right, thank you.